Principles Show daily podcast by and for you.
All right, let's dive into something pretty big happening in global education. You've heard of BRICS, right?
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Exactly. They're making moves that could totally change how we think about, well, learning and working, maybe even traveling the world.
Absolutely. And at the center of it all, there's this new BRICS International Competence Centre just opened up in Russia.
Not just some building, though, right?
No, way bigger. This is about building a whole system, like a network, for exchanging education on a scale we haven't really seen before.
I keep seeing this term educational tourism. Sounds kind of catchy, but it feels like it's about a lot more than just, studying abroad for a semester.
Yeah, it's more ambitious, for sure. Think of it as like a web of opportunities. Study abroad programs are part of it, of course, but also internships, conferences, research collaborations, all designed to, make it easier for students, even professionals, to move between these BRICS countries.
And this seems like something Russia's really pushing forward, isn't it? Didn't President Putin himself get this whole project started?
That's right. One of his key initiatives, actually. It shows how committed Russia is to becoming a real leader in education, especially within the BRICS alliance.
Makes sense. They're really highlighting their expertise. There's this quote from Olga Zakharova. She's from Russia's Agency for Strategic Initiatives, and really stuck with me. She said, "Russia has something to be proud of and something to show. I would like their methodology and experience to be replicated in the BRICS countries."
Interesting, right. It's not just about sharing what they know. It's almost like they're promoting a specific way of doing education, like a model they think is valuable for the whole world.
And they're not wasting any time. That same agency, the Agency for Strategic Initiatives, they're already working with universities across all the BRICS nations, getting this system set up.
And that's where things get really exciting. Think about the potential. Imagine a future where, say, your degree or your qualifications are recognized across all 5 BRICS nations.
Oh, wow.
You could study engineering in Brazil, do an internship in, say, China's tech industry, which is booming, and then land your dream job in India. All seamless.
That's a pretty amazing vision, especially for someone like me. I love traveling, experiencing different cultures. But, got to be realistic. There are always 2 sides to things. What are some of maybe the downsides or challenges they might hit trying to make this happen?
Well, one of the biggest ones is going to be those cultural and linguistic differences. We're talking 5 very distinct languages and a whole range of customs, different education systems even. How do you make a truly integrated learning experience when just communicating can be a hurdle?
Yeah, that's a good point. Even with something like a simple study abroad program, you can run into all sorts of cultural misunderstandings, even logistical headaches. Now imagine trying to coordinate that across 5 huge and incredibly diverse countries.
Exactly. And then there's the question of, well, will your degree be recognized even within the European Union, which has a much more, established system for educational exchange? There can be issues with getting your degree or your certifications recognized in another country. So how are the BRICS nations going to handle this on an even larger, more diverse scale?
Yeah, what's the point of all this mobility if your qualifications don't mean anything when you cross a border?
Right, exactly. And then on top of that, there's the whole issue of funding. Creating this network of educational opportunities, it's going to take a lot of money, investment from all these countries.
Especially with the economic challenges a lot of countries are facing right now.
Exactly. So the ambition is there, it's admirable, but actually putting this vision into practice, that's going to be super complex.
And let's not forget about politics. I mean, the BRICS nations might agree on certain economic goals, but they also have their own political systems, their own foreign policy objectives.
For sure. Maintaining that sense of unity, especially with everything happening globally, that's going to be critical if they want this to succeed in the long term.
So it sounds like this whole BRICS education initiative, it's kind of a mixed bag, full of potential, but also facing some real obstacles.
It is. And that's what makes it so interesting to look at, honestly. It's a huge experiment with the potential to, completely change global education as we know it.
Okay, so we've got the basics, the ambition, the potential impact, and the challenges they're up against.
Yeah.
But what does this actually mean for the average person? How could this BRICS initiative affect someone who's not planning to, study abroad or work in one of these countries? Let's dig into that in the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so we've got this big picture, this grand plan for like a BRICS-powered education system. But what about me? Or, our listeners out there? How could this impact someone like us if we're not exactly planning a trip to a BRICS country anytime soon?
That's a really good question, and you might be surprised by the answer. Even if you never actually go to one of these countries, this whole initiative, it could still have an impact on you in ways you might not expect.
Really? Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, let's say you work in tech. Imagine companies start looking for people who have experience working across, BRICS markets. Suddenly, that online course you took on Brazilian business practices or that semester you spent learning Mandarin, those become really valuable on your resume.
Ah, I see what you're saying. It's about being ahead of the game,
Yeah.
realizing that skills and experiences that maybe used to be considered niche, they could become super important as the BRICS countries, become more influential globally.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual careers either. Think about innovation. When you bring together talented people from all these different backgrounds, different cultures, you create a space for new ideas, new solutions. We could see breakthroughs in anything, really. Renewable energy, healthcare, all coming from these BRICS collaborations.
So it's not just students and academics. It's like building a global network of innovators, and that could benefit everyone.
Exactly. And that brings up another really interesting point about this initiative. We've been talking about the movement of people, students, and professionals, but what about ideas? Could this lead to a more open, more collaborative way of sharing knowledge globally?
That's a cool thought. Instead of knowledge being stuck within countries, siloed, could we see a more free-flowing exchange of research, expertise, best practices across different regions?
Exactly. And that shift, that could be huge. It could speed up scientific discoveries, foster more understanding between cultures, even help us come up with better solutions for those big global challenges, like climate change or poverty.
Okay, so we've got this potential brain trust forming, this global network of innovation, all fueled by BRICS collaboration. But let's flip it for a second. We talked before about the challenges, language barriers, degree recognition. Are there any other potential downsides to this initiative? Things we should be thinking about?
Yeah, there are a few. One that comes up a lot is the potential for brain drain, especially in countries like South Africa, Brazil. If talented people are drawn to those bigger BRICS economies, China and India, it could make existing inequalities worse.
So even though this initiative wants to promote development and cooperation, there's a risk it could actually widen the gap, between the haves and the have-nots, even within the BRICS alliance itself.
That's a real concern, and it's something policymakers will need to think carefully about how to address. Another challenge is the risk of, cultural homogenization. As interaction and exchange increase, there's always that chance that certain dominant cultures could overshadow others, and we could lose some diversity, some unique perspectives.
It's that classic tension, isn't it? Globalization versus preserving local identities. How do you strike a balance between encouraging collaboration and making sure individual cultures don't disappear?
It's a tough balance for sure. It'll take constant dialogue and being sensitive to the concerns of everyone involved. And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, geopolitics.
Right, we can't ignore that. How could political tensions, power dynamics between the BRICS nations, how could that affect the success of this whole initiative?
Yeah, the global landscape right now is complicated, that's for sure. We're seeing shifting alliances, economic competition, ideological differences, and all of that could easily spill over into this educational sphere.
So if they want this to work, they're going to have to maintain that spirit of cooperation, that shared purpose, even when they disagree on other things.
Absolutely. It's going to take strong leadership and a real commitment to dialogue and compromise from all five countries.
It sounds like this BRICS education initiative, it's a bit like, walking through a minefield. Lots of potential, but definitely some risks to watch out for along the way.
That's a good way to put it. And that's what makes it such a fascinating case study, really. It's like a microcosm of our interconnected world, all the complexities, all the opportunities.
So we've talked about the good and the bad, the potential, the risks, all that.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway for our listeners? What should they be thinking about?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. The world is changing, and those BRICS nations, they're right at the forefront of that change. Whether you're a student, a professional, just someone who's interested in what's going on in the world, it's worth keeping an eye on what's happening over there.
Makes sense. Even if you're not planning on moving to one of those countries or working in a BRICS-related field, these changes, they can still ripple out and affect you.
Exactly. The innovations, the collaborations coming out of this network, they could affect everything from the tech you use to the jobs that are available.
So basically, stay informed, be aware of these global shifts, how they could create new opportunities.
Yeah, and disrupt old ones too. The world's getting more interconnected all the time. Understanding initiatives like this one, it can give you an advantage.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, that idea of brain drain from some of those BRICS countries. It's a valid concern for sure. Is there any way to, harness the good stuff from this initiative while also, I don't know, minimizing those negative effects?
That's a really important question. One solution could be focusing on building capacity in all the BRICS nations, not just the big economies. Investing in education, infrastructure, especially in places like South Africa, Brazil, that could create more opportunities for people to stay and contribute where they are.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Spreading the benefits instead of concentrating everything in just a few places.
Exactly. Another approach could be encouraging what they call circular migration. Basically, you make it easier for people to move between the BRICS countries for education, work experience, but then they go back to their home countries, bringing those skills and knowledge with them.
So it's not just a one-way street. It's more of a, back and forth exchange that benefits everyone.
Exactly. That model, it's been successful in other parts of the world. It could be key to making sure this BRICS initiative leads to development that's more equitable, more sustainable.
All right, so we've covered a lot today: the vision, the potential, the challenges, even some possible solutions. But I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Imagine if this BRICS model, this whole idea of educational cooperation, became the norm everywhere. How would that change global education? How would it change, our understanding of different cultures, our ability to solve problems together?
It's an interesting thought, isn't it? A world where education doesn't stop at borders, where anyone with the talent and the drive has opportunities no matter where they come from.
It's a pretty inspiring vision, but also kind of daunting, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a vision we can all play a part in shaping by staying informed, by being open to global perspectives, by supporting policies that promote collaboration and understanding. We can help build a future where education brings people together, instead of dividing them.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep those minds curious, and remember, the world's full of possibilities if you're willing to explore.